pronounce me the first name?
Stephen.
It is Stephen, not Stephen. Mizmor David, Adonai roi lo echsar, binot esher yarbitzeni, amei menuchot inachaluni, nafshi yoshovev Yancheni v'maglei tzedek l'mahan shemo, gam ki elech b'getz al mavet, lo yira ra ki ata imadi. Shiftecha u'minshantecha chema yinachamuni. Taroch lefanai, shulchan neged tzorehai, dishanta v'Hashem et roshi, kosi revayam. Ach tov v'chesed rafuni kol yemei chayam, v'shavti b'vet Adonai, leorech yamim. Psalm 23, the Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Giving me repose in green meadows, leading me beside the still waters to revive my spirit. Guiding me on the right path, for that is God's essence. Though I walk through a valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod, they comfort me. You prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall be my portion all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This morning we are here to say farewell to a remarkable woman, Naomi Chapman. Nechama bat Moshe v'Sosi. Nechama, the daughter of Moshe and Sosi. She passed away on March 15th of this year. In the Hebrew calendar, that equates to the 8th day of the month of Adar 2 at the age of 84. Naomi is survived by her son Stephen, married to Sima, Kenneth, married to Michelle, and Arthur, married to Joanne. Her grandchildren, and if I make a mistake, please correct me. Sha'ari, Jessica, Yael, Daniel, Orly, Leora, and Noah. and a great-grandchild. Is it Mikkel? She was predeceased by her husband Jack and her parents, Morris and Sophie. I have had the privilege of introducing many wonderful and extraordinary women. And very often when a family and I meet and I hear the story of their mother, it always reminds me of something that we as husbands are supposed to do on Friday night as we welcome the Sabbath during Kabbalat Shabbat. When we get home, one of the first things we're supposed to do is chant or say this proverb, Proverb 31, to our wives. So I'm going to read it as an introduction. I think it again encapsulates who she was. And you'll also hear from her sons later on. And I suspect that you'll agree with me that what I'm about to say and read reflects who she was. A good wife and mother who can find? She is precious far beyond rubies. Her husband trusted in her, and he lacked nothing thereby. She rendered him good and no evil all the days of her life. She was robed in strength and dignity, and cheerfully faced the future. She opened her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue was guided by kindness. She attended to the affairs of her household and ate not the bread of idleness. Her children came forward to bless her husband as well, and praise her. Many women have done superbly, but you surpassed them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a good woman is much to be praised. Give her honor for the fruit of her hands wherever people gather. Her deeds speak her praise. The eulogy that we offer at this time is to celebrate the loved one's memory, but it's more than that. It's an act, it's considered one of the greatest mitzvahs that we can do, and the reason for that is that when we eulogize someone, they're not here to thank us. It's done from the heart. It's done with great passion. So we're very fortunate that Stephen, Kenneth, and Brian have agreed to share their memory of their mother. Oh, I'm sorry. I got you. See, thank you for correcting me. I appreciate that. So please come on up at this time and share your memories with us. I don't know where I got Brian from.
I'm here to bid farewell to my dear mother, Naomi Chapman. She died on Friday at the age of 84. She had been sick for a long time, but there are so many good things to remember. First and foremost, my mother was a devoted wife, mother, mother-in-law, grandmother, and great-grandmother. But she was at various times a copywriter, a PR woman, and a sales coordinator. Among other things, she loved pretty well all the arts. Good comedy, preparing elaborate dinner parties, traveling, reading. At one point, she was a member of 3 book clubs, including one with the famous writer Carol Shields, and spending time with family and friends. My mother was born Naomi Romalis on November 7th, 1934, and grew up on Mountain Avenue near Faraday School. It was there she began her love of learning. Simply put, my mother was really, really smart. My mother, for whatever reason, never gave us tremendous detail about her childhood, and she was too modest to mention what a good student she always was. The only hint we had about this was a hardcover copy of Bullfinch's Mythology that she had won, to quote from the principal's inscription, for outstanding work in Faraday Junior High School. She later attended St. John's High School and had extremely fond memories of her time there. Upon graduation, she attended the Faculty of Arts at the University of Manitoba. She told us how much she loved her time in university without describing how well she succeeded there. I had to find out about that from other people. It was just on Friday, after telling my cousin Herbert Rosner in Vancouver about my mother's passing, that he recalled how he was 1 year behind her in university and that she was part of a group of women who, in his words, were all very smart. And a few years ago, her slightly younger first cousin, Carol Rand of Los Angeles, who was also born Romalis, told me how when she took courses at the U of M, English courses at the U of M a few years later, professors would ask, "Are you Naomi's sister?" "No," Carol would reply, "I'm her cousin." And the professors would say, "Well, she was one of the most brilliant students I ever taught." On June 12, 1955, shortly after graduating, she married my father, Jack Chapman. They were married for 55 years until he died in 2010. It was a relationship filled with love, mutual support, and respect in good times and bad. I always admired how each would take turns being the other's best friend, coach, and advisor. They shared some tears, more laughter, and a deep love of the arts. There's a theme here. Above all, they loved their 3 sons. We could not have asked for more devoted parents. Baseball games, school concerts, other extracurricular activities, they were always there. When I ran in my first marathon, I was very surprised to see my parents in the crowd near the finish line. I was 46 at the time. Growing up, Dad would be the one to help us with math and science. Mom would help us with English. What did Shakespeare mean when he said, "Beware the Ides of March"? Or what was Robert Frost getting at in The Road Not Taken? Ask Mom. And when we were younger, she'd spend hours helping us with written assignments. It wasn't just about spelling and grammar, but the art of expressing oneself clearly. I remember Stephen and I were once saying how we'd help other students in university with their papers, and we couldn't believe how badly some people write. We smiled and said, "Imagine what Mom would have said." She put her skills to good use in the late 1960s, becoming an essay marker for Elmwood High School. And then she became more ambitious. It was the mid-1970s, and my brothers were out of childhood, and my brothers and I were out of our childhoods, and my mother wanted to join the workforce. This was a time when employers might say to women, "You're just a housewife." It wasn't easy, and there were many rejection letters, but she persisted, and her persistence paid off. Her first job was doing public relations for what was then the Manitoba Theatre Workshop, now the Prairie Theatre Exchange. She loved it. I remember she gave me a pair of tickets for one Saturday night performance of a play. She had worked tirelessly to promote it and was quite nervous about it. It was my good fortune to tell her the next morning that the place was filled to capacity and they had to bring in extra chairs for everyone. She went from there to CKY Radio, KY58, where she was the chief copywriter. It was fun hearing a commercial on the car radio, knowing your mother wrote it. It was also a source of a lot of swag. My brothers and I got a lot of posters, tickets to concerts, and almost every station sponsored movie premieres. I even got to take a date to a season opening night performance at MTC. Rather impressive stuff when you're only 21. Her last position was as a sales coordinator at the Winnipeg Convention Center. Throughout it all, my mother taught us the joys of arts and literature, but it wasn't initially appreciated. I can't say that I liked symphony music as a child, and in fairness, at first she didn't like our rock records, but I became a big fan of classical music, especially Beethoven. She came to like Carole King, Neil Diamond, The Guess Who, and even Steely Dan. And Naomi loved the movies. She would take my brothers and me, or sometimes just one or two of us, to old classic movies that might be showing somewhere on Sunday afternoons. Or sometimes it was to well-crafted horror movies. Roman Polanski's The Tenant comes to mind, or English, somewhat obscure English dramas. If you can ever see The Dresser with Albert Finney and Tom Courtenay, do so. My brothers and I used to call these films, as a compliment, mum movies. My mother liked style, particularly in the world of food. She was an extraordinary cook, always trying new recipes, but food had to be served with panache. No one could set a table like her. Think of Downton Abbey and you have an idea. When she was extremely proud of a setting, she'd even ask my dad to take a picture of it. I'm not a neat person by nature, but I'm proud to have inherited that trait. But all of this was secondary to the importance of finding love and joy in life itself. And that family ranks above all else. She certainly encouraged us to get educations, but was happy for all of us when we did our year-off backpack travel journeys. I could ask for advice, and until she got ill, I could get it. In the early 2000s, my mother started showing signs of dementia. It became greatly exacerbated after she suffered a heart attack and underwent triple bypass surgery in 2007. But things really declined at the same time of my father's passing in 2010, and she lived in a care home since then. But in keeping with the theme of this, when I'd meet with care home staff, they'd always say how my mother's favorite programming was the music. On one of my visits a few weeks ago, I wheeled her to an area where they were playing music, Sinatra among others. At the time, I was wondering, what was she thinking, as her cognitive abilities at this point were so diminished? Right at that moment, she took my hand and kissed it. As Neil Sedaka once said, that's when the music takes me to a brighter day. Before concluding, I want to thank my dear wife, Joanne. Even in retirement, still a nurse extraordinaire, for all her help in this, especially in the past week. My mother died on Friday, March 15th, which, in keeping with the literary references I've thrown in, was the Ides of March. Mom, thank you for all you did for us in this world. May you be in a place where you can be the way you were with Jack, your best friend and love of your life. Dining on good food, drinking better wine, listening to still better music, and may the plays there all have happy endings. Thank you.
As Arthur said, my mother loved literature, particularly literature that came from the United Kingdom. So there's a passage that I thought was wholly appropriate from Dylan Thomas. They shall have stars at elbow and foot. Though they go mad, they shall be sane. Though they sink through the sea, they shall rise again. Though lovers be lost, love shall not, and death shall have no dominion. The line that resonates with me the most is, though they go mad, they shall be sane. While my mother did not go mad, the line strikes a chord because of how she suffered the last 12 years. It's a horrible thing to be alive, but to stop living. By proxy, I feel a responsibility to give my mother a final moment of clarity, to say the words and express the feelings I'm certain she wanted to express, indeed to cry out, to say how profoundly unfair it was that a woman so smart and knowledgeable should be incapacitated by such a terrible affliction, to say how much she missed my father, To say how unfair it was that in this supposed golden year, she did not get to rejoice in the accomplishments of her grandchildren or meet her great-grandson in a meaningful manner. And finally, to proclaim how profoundly lonely she was during her last years, how forgotten she must have felt. On that note, I must acknowledge the love and support of our cousin Brenda Berry for all she did. This is all terribly sad, but in the end, I will remember, from a relatively young age, being taken to a host of foreign films. I will remember a woman captivated by her Victorian novels, Saturday afternoons when my mother would prepare dinner parties while listening to her favorite music, sitting around the dining room table with my parents and family and friends drinking wine and talking about anything and everything for hours. And finally, the other joy she derived from her 6 granddaughters and Daniel. And Shari, Jessica, Daniel, Yael, Orly, Laura, and Noah, never forget that, please. Please never forget when Mama and Papa were a part of your life. Never forget how much they loved you.
What my brothers have said is basically what I wanted to say, but I feel the need for clarity. Yes, my mother loved movies, and she loved horror movies that were well crafted, which of course gave rise to one of the best family stories that we have. Hi. She was a brilliant student. I saw one of her report cards, and based on my marks and maybe Kenneth and Arthur's, and based on the marks of her grandchildren, I'd say that it skipped a generation. And she was a great cook, except for one time when she made a tuna casserole, which Kenneth and I were instructed to eat every night, and somehow it disappeared without us eating it. And it wasn't something we would feed the dog. She also loved good humor. She loved Monty Python. She loved British comedies and things like that. And I know what she considered to be bad humor. And bad humor was the time that we were going to a movie, and I'm driving and Kenneth is in the front seat beside me, and we're just pulling up in front of Sears, and a group of nuns is in the crosswalk, and Kenneth and I looked at each other, and at the same time, as if on cue, said, "Now." For some reason, she didn't appreciate that. You remember that, Ken? If you come to our house for the Shiva and the visitation, you will see a picture, or 2 pictures, of how I want to remember my parents. And one is a picture of my dad smiling and holding his pipe, which he gave up many years ago at Shari's insistence. And the other is of my mother, and she is laughing hysterically while holding Daniel, who was at the time just over 2 months old. And I can't remember specifically which song it was, but Kenneth, for some reason, was singing Irish ballads. In Irish, I think he sang "Oh Danny Boy" to Daniel. And I think he was singing "When Irish Eyes Are Smiling." I can't really remember. But my mother loved fun. And, you know, sometimes my mother would just really absorb the fun, and I don't think that any of my cousins or my brothers will forget Auntie Gertie's 25th anniversary party, where my mother and Norman, her friend, and Joanne, her friend, took a cardboard box and put it over their heads and called it the Cone of Silence. Or that time out at the cottage when my dad gave Arthur a bunch of money and said, "Take Ava, take Kayla, Eileen, Stephen, Kenneth, go to Grand Beach, come back in a couple of hours." And we all ended up swimming in our clothes, and my aunts driving home in their bathing suits. It really, like I said, my mother loved to laugh, and I liked to make her laugh. And one of the ways I would make her laugh was when I was in college and I would phone home, collect, And for my nieces, that's where you go to a payphone and you you dial 0 and you tell the operator, that's a person, who you want to call, and they would say, Stephen is calling collect, but sometimes I would say, Mr. Duck is calling collect, Kermit Frog is calling collect, Pierre Trudeau, whoever I happen to feel like imitating. My mom tells that her first date with my father, they went to a drive-in, and my mother was asked what she wanted, and she said, I'll have a burger with no onions, and my dad almost instantly fell in love with her. And one of my first dates with Seema, we went out to Nibbler's Nosh, and she ordered a Caesar salad with no onions. And Seema tells me I turned various shades of pink. And then when Jessica started dating Grant, she found that they have a mutual hatred of onions. So I guess it's genetic. But I'd like to think that in the last years, there was a part of my mother's mind that provided her with comfort, that allowed her to be with my father, to be with friends, and to have a good time. And I'm sure that right now, her and my dad are on some fantastic trip and just enjoying being in each other's company. And I will miss her tremendously.
Thank you very much. Something struck a chord with me, first and foremost. I think the greatest honor we can do here is to accentuate good humor. When you hear a fantastic joke and you laugh out loud, and I mean laugh out loud, remember her. I think she would really appreciate it. On a smaller scale, who was the one who sang the Irish tunes? Sometime today, at one or other function, I think it might not be inappropriate for you to at least attempt to do a little bit of that. Oh, he said if there's scotch, make sure there's some, okay? We want to hear him today. There would be fantastic memory for her as well. What I'm going to say now encapsulates, I think, who she was again, because it's something that we say at this time. So, to commemorate her immortal soul, may Naomi Chapman, Nechama bat Moshe v'Sosi, shine among the brilliant ones whose brightness lights up the heavens. May all her beautiful qualities that we've heard about of her life quickly find her way into our own minds and hearts and souls, so that we may learn to think and feel and behave in the highest possible level. If we can succeed in doing this, we will actually have made it possible for Naomi to live on in this world through our deeds and our achievements for all the future generations of her friends and her family. The reciting of the El Malrachamim, the memorial prayer, that is often referred to the phone call to the soul, because the name is actually mentioned. So I will chant it both in Hebrew and then repeat it in English. And to honor her memory, we invite you to stand if you can at this time. El Malrachamim Shochen Bamromim Hametzeh Menucha Nachona Tachat Kanfei Hashkina B'mahalot Kedoshim Udkorim Kezohar Harakia Maskirim Et nishmat Nechama bat Moshe v'Sosi she'alcha le'olama Bagan Eden te'menuchata Anaha bal harachamim Astiracha b'tzedek enofecho le'olamim Utzror b'tzror hachem et nishmatam Adonai hunachalatam, v'tanuach b'shalom mishkavam, v'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Naomi Chapman, Nechama bat Moshe V'Sosi, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. You may be seated. Immediately following the interment, which will be at the Shared Cemetery located at the corner of Main and Armstrong, across from West Kildonan Park, everyone is invited back here for a gathering in honor of Naomi. Friends and family are invited to pay their respects at Shiva, beginning tonight at 7 o'clock. And then on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday from 2 to 4 in the afternoon, and from 7 to 9 in the evening. Davening will be at 7 in the evenings. The Shiva will be observed at number 19 Doug McKay Place, home of Stephen and Seema Chapman. Family will be getting up from Shiva on Thursday morning here at the Shared Tzedek. At this time, I'd like to invite the pallbearers to take your place beside the coffin. And as they make their exit, following them, I'd like to invite the family as well to go to their transportation at this time. Once everyone is in place, I invite the rest of you to form, I'll tell you in a minute when it is, to form two lines as we now say our final farewell to Naomi. If you're going to follow us to the cemetery, please put on your flashing lights. And the most important part, observe all traffic lights. We no longer have a automatic through a red light. We will wait at the cemetery until you're all there. If you cannot make it to the cemetery, you're more than welcome to stay here and wait for us to come back and then join us for the meal constellation, which, by the way, will be downstairs in one of the lounges right beside the gift shop. I always like to invite all of you, when the family comes back here to the synagogue for the meal in honor of Naomi, I'd like us to make sure that the family sits down first, has something to eat or drink. I know everyone here wants to pass on their condolences, which is perfectly okay, but let's make sure they have some sustenance before we do that. I've seen families stand there for quite a long time before they have something to eat as well. So make sure they're the first ones to do it, and then afterwards, of course, pass on your condolences. I want to thank everybody for coming here and honoring her memory with your presence. And just give us a moment as the family prepares to move on to the transportation. Just give us a couple more moments and then we'll have a chance to form the two lines out in the lobby as well as the back stairs. Again, thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you back here. Pardon me? I believe they're in paper, I think. I haven't seen the announcement. As far as I know, I don't know. 2 to 4 in the afternoon, 7 to 9 in the evening. But no, today's 7.